the Down South Hunting Podcast. This is Mike Higman, your host, and I'm really excited to be bringing you a brand new episode after 7 months plus of radio silence and probably a couple months before that. The episodes have been few and far between, so I am really grateful to all the listeners who have stayed subscribed or have been watching out, waiting for new episodes, people that have reached out to me. Thank you so much. If you are a new listener, welcome, and I really hope you like the content that I'm going to be putting out here. There's a ton of great content if you're willing to go back and listen. Tons of great stuff that you can listen to. Today's episode is going to be a treat, though. It's somebody that I've been wanting to talk to for years. I interviewed James Stovall, who is the record buck holder for the state of Florida. He killed an absolute monster back in 1999 on public land with his bow. And it's not a case where somebody just got lucky on some quota hunt and killed a monster. He put in the work with the scouting. He had lots of experience in the past. This guy knows what he's doing and has a lot that we can learn from. He's also extremely humble, so he doesn't come off telling us what to do or anything, but I think there are a lot of gems in there if we're just kind of willing to listen to the story and what he did. So what I decided to do is I split this up into two parts. So this first part that we're going to listen to today is the story of the hunt and how it went down, and we kind of get into the tactics and strategies of it. And then I'm going to do a second part. We'll release that sometime before the 4th of July. That is going to be focusing on his tactics and strategies that he uses year in, year out, the way he uses trail cameras and mock scrapes, and some of the other things. He hunts public land in Florida and a lease in Georgia as well. So a quick update on me is I'm fully moved into Georgia now. I bought a property with some acreage. My hunting last season was fun, but not really exciting. I didn't kill any monster deer. Actually, I didn't even get a buck, but I did get some meat for the freezer, and I got the kids involved. So that was a lot of fun. I don't have any plans right now to do any preseason episodes going over my goals and whatever I'm planning on doing and gear and that kind of stuff. I'm just really going to try to keep the podcast focused on quality over quantity right now. And I'm going to try to be interviewing the people I find the most interesting in the hunting world, whether that be biologists or skilled hunters or people with great stories. I'm just going to really try to keep this podcast tight and focused. So I hope that's something that you guys are wanting to listen to and enjoy, and we have that shared interest. If you enjoy this episode, I would really appreciate if you would be willing to leave a quick review on whatever platform you're listening. We haven't been putting a lot of content out, so I'm probably buried. There's some other really good podcasts out there on hunting in the South, and I'm hoping you're listening to those too. But I would like to just get up in the mix a little bit so other people can find these and listen, and we can get the most value out of these interviews I'm going to be doing. This episode is brought to you by Pith Gear, and you might be wondering to yourself, well, who is Pith Gear? Pith is a brand that I launched last year. I took my ability to sell products online and on Amazon and wanted to mix it with my passion for hunting and bring high-quality products at a reasonable price for hunters. Pith means the meat or the core of a matter, and that's what I wanted to bring is like core, essential, high-quality gear. My first product is a portable ozone generator that you can throw in your bag. It fits in your cup holder in your car. It's run by a lithium-ion battery. I got with several manufacturers that make ozone generators, and I wanted to find the one that could get me the most punch for the size. So this unit has 350 milligrams per hour of ozone in a portable unit. And the reason that's important is a lot of these small little portable units, ones that I've tried before, like throwing in a backpack or something like that, they don't release enough ozone to really make a difference. So I'm not going to go into more detail about it right now. I will in some future episodes. But you could check it out on Amazon. The easiest way to find it is if you just search for Pith Purge. That's Pithpurge, and that will bring you to the unit, and there's a lot more information on that listings. If you have any questions about or anything, please reach out to me on social media. Facebook Messenger or through the Down South email would be a good way to do that. It's downsouthhunt@gmail.com. I am excited to get into this interview. Thanks for sticking with me through this intro, and I hope you enjoy. All right, I got James Stovall on the line, and I am really excited to have him on the podcast for the first episode we're getting back to in a long time. And James is somebody that I had thought of basically when we launched the podcast would be really good guy to talk to because one, he holds the top buck in the state of Florida, but two, he's followed that up with a lot of other quality bucks on public land in Florida. So, I know it wasn't just a fluke deal. So today I'm really excited to talk to him just from beginning to end to hear the story of his record-setting buck. And then maybe we'll get him back on later and we'll talk about some tactics and some other stuff. So James, I'm really excited to have you on. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, Mike. I appreciate you asking me to come on and share the hunt.
Yeah, we've been talking for a few months and we finally got this together. And like I said, I couldn't be more excited to have somebody like you on to kind of relaunch the podcast. So maybe just to start out, if you could kind of give us your hunting background, we don't need like every detail, but just kind of basically from, what led up to the point of you drawing the Green Swamp West hunt and going on that hunt. Like where were you in your hunting career and how'd you get there?
Well, I'm 52 years old now, and that's kind of hard to believe. Years are flying by. But I started bow hunting at the age of 14. My mom bought me my first compound bow at the age of 14 in the spring, practiced all summer, and started bow hunting in 1984. That was my first year bow hunting. And just it took off like wildfire. I was so into shooting, loved it, loved the sport of hunting in general. But I really love to bow hunt. That's my primary choice of weapons, if you will. But now I've been bow hunting roughly about 38 years. So if we back up to 99, that's the year I harvested the deer. So that was the first year that was open as a special opportunity hunt. So I knew that I'd heard from some friends that have hog hunted the property years prior to that, and they had told me that they'd seen some big deer. They saw some, just big rubs, big buck sign, and it was kind of well known that it was becoming available as part of a special opportunity hunt. So I applied, and ironically, I only applied for the 2 archery hunts. Back then, I was strictly bow hunting. And If I would have applied for the 3 gun hunts, then chances are I could have gotten 1 or 2 of those hunts as well. But this was back in 1999. So I applied, and you apply for the specials like now. Like today is June 15th. Today's the deadline to apply for quotas and special opportunity hunts. So I applied, and I was drawn for both archery hunts. And then I was scouting all summer. I think I scouted 17 trips out there. And this place, the gate is about 14 miles from my house. So it's not that far. So that gave me the opportunity to go out there as frequently as I could. So I went out there, and on the 17th trip, which was the Monday before opening day was the following Saturday, which would have been September 25th. I went back out there that Monday morning, and I wanted to check a new area. And I'd been seeing some really respectable bucks that would make the Florida registry, but I was just kind of wanting to find that next level buck, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I was just striving and just kept going, and I was seeing some big tracks. So I went back, I went to this new area that I hadn't gone to yet, and I cut this trail coming off this Blackjack Hill, Scrub Oak Hill, and just ate up with fresh, big deer tracks. And all the bucks that I had been seeing up to that point were still bachelored up. So I thought to myself, well, this has got to be a bachelor group, and these are big tracks. So, and it had freshly rained, so the tracks were real fresh. All the fresh tracks were like probably 8 or 10 hours old at the most because of the previous rain. So I got on those tracks and I followed them across this fire break, went back in the scrub oaks, palmettos, and I'd lose their tracks in the sand, and I would just kind of zigzag through there and pick up the tracks again. And I just kept in the general direction that they were going. Well, a few hundred yards up, I came to a fire break, and there was about a 10-foot section in that fire break that was just up with tracks. Both prior to the rain, you could tell the tracks were reined in, and then fresh tracks going both directions. And they were all big tracks. Most of them, the majority of them were big tracks. So I just crossed the fire break, continued on down through the woods, and I went about 200 more yards, and I just looked up, and the buck I harvested on the 25th, there he was about 30, 40 yards in front of me with his head down, feeding. And I could see his back and the tips of his, the top several inches of the top of his rack sticking out of the brush. And I knew it was a buck right away. So I stopped, and he picked his head up, and he was chewing on, he was in like a low cluster of blackjack oaks, regen oaks that had been like bulldozed, and they were just fresh growth coming up. And I could hear him actually chewing on those acorns. And he just looked around. When he picked his head up, I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is what I've been looking for, And anyway, he put his head down, was walking around. I watched him for 5 or 10 minutes, something like that. And then all of a sudden, he just became alert. The wind probably, shifted. And he jerked his head up in my direction, looking. And then he just turned and kind of stiff walked, bobbing his head off, and stopped out there about 40, 50 yards, probably 50 yards, looked back, and then turned, walked across this little pond, and now he's 100 yards, and he stood there like a statue for another 5 or 10 minutes, and then he just dissolved back into this wall of palmettos and gallberries. And that was like a little peninsula, if you will, that protruded out into this pond, and that's where they were bedded up, the bucks. So I immediately left and went back to the house, got a pair of sticks and a lock on, and went back out there. And you have to ride a bike in, so I had to park at the front gate. So I toted the sticks and the lock on back in there. Now it's midday, 11:30, 12:30, something like that, middle of the day. I'm walking back in there, and I get about 100 yards from those low blackjacks where he was feeding that morning, and I was not expecting to see deer. And I look up, and there's 4 bucks standing there looking at me in the exact 20-yard vicinity from where he was early that morning. So I just froze, and he was one of them. There was a 10-point that was maybe 20s for sure, maybe 30s, 130s. He was really nice.
Wow. And
then 2 smaller bucks. And the 8-point, he was teens for sure. And then a registry 8-point, 105-ish, something like that. So then they just turned and started flagging off, and they just bounded off, and they went across that pond and disappeared into the same spot that he went that morning. So I just snuck up there, picked out a pine tree, hung my set, and left. And back then, I wasn't running cameras like I do now, so I didn't have any intel as far as cameras. It was all visual. And so I left, and I didn't go back until Saturday morning, opening morning. And I got up in the stand, and so when I got back Monday, I told my wife, I said, all right, I'm going to get a video camera because I've wanted to film my hunts. I need to document this. Even if I don't kill him, I need to get this deer on camera. So went to think Best Buy, got a camera, already had the camera arm, took that out there. So I'm up there before daylight, and I'm mounting the camera arm onto the pine tree to hang my camera on. And it's a full moon, so everything's kind of illuminated, if you will, and a lot of sugar sand right in there on the ground. So when the deer come through with the moon at, full and the sugar sand, you can kind of see deer highlighted, I guess, against the white sand, if you will.
Yep.
So I heard palmettos, deer walking through the palmettos, and I looked behind the tree, and I'm assuming it was these 4 bucks coming from the hill and the fire break and walking past me going back to bed. And one buck was like spitting distance from my tree, and I really couldn't identify the racks. All I could tell is they had headgear,
Yeah.
And they walked past me and went off in the direction that they usually bed. So there was no way I was getting down that day. I was in for the long haul. So I sat all day. I saw a doe about 10 a.m. And then about an hour before dark, something like that, maybe 2 hours before dark, a heavy thunderstorm came through, lightning, hard rain. And in my experience, afternoons after a hard rain, and that rain stops within an hour or two of dark, it's like a light switch comes on. The animals just start moving. So I was kind of looking forward to that, excited about that. So the rain had all but stopped, and you could still hear distant thunder. And I put the camera up in my little waterproof fanny backpack thing, and I look over, and something caught my eye, and my deer was standing over there about 100 yards away on the edge of that bedding area, and he was shaking just like after a dog giving a bath. He was just shaking the water off of him. And so I quickly got the camera out of my pack, mounted it, got some footage of him, and then they didn't cut. There was another buck with them that was the 8-point mid-teens type buck. And the 8-point just committed. He didn't stop. He just started walking, and he started walking up to that fire break, that crossing. And my buck fed around underneath this oak tree, milling around, and he kept stopping and looking at that smaller 8-pointer, in the direction he went. And then he just twitched his tail, started walking in that direction. So I'm like, well, I know where he's going. So I climbed down. I would not have been able to climb down if I wouldn't have had the stick ladder. A climber would have been too loud.
Yeah.
So I swung around. I grabbed my top limb. I bit the top limb and held the bow with my teeth and swung around, climbing down the stick ladder, got to the ground. And I don't know if you've ever been out there to West Side, Green Swamp West.
I have not.
But it's real diverse terrain. Like, you go to different areas in there, and you would think you're in totally different areas of Florida. So the area I was in was relatively hilly. And so once I got to the ground, I could not see him, and he couldn't see me. So I just did a big, probably 100, 150-yard circle, and circled around and got in front of him and positioned myself in between the fire break crossing and where I last saw him.
Yeah.
Snuck around there, went as far as I dared, stood up next to this little scrub oak, and I'm looking, and then I see him. And he's just making his way towards the fire break. I never saw the other 8-pointer. He was just standing out there in the brush and the scrub oaks. So my deer just kept, working his way up. Well, now he is as close as he's going to get, and he's going to start getting further away. And back then I had a single pin set at 20 yards. And by shooting enough with broadheads, I knew that the bottom of my sight housing, where my bubble was, that was my 50-yard mark. So if I held that bubble on a milk jug that I was practicing on back then, at 50 yards, my broadhead would hit the milk jug. So that was my reference, my 50-yard reference. He ended up being 53 yards when I shot. So I drew back, I held, and I can promise you I was not holding steady. And I sent it, and the first shot, it spine shot him.
Oh, yeah.
And he just dropped, hit him kind of high shoulder, right in the spine. And his rear end dropped first, and then he just collapsed. And then he started, I don't know how you would explain it, but bellowing or whatever,
Oh, yeah.
Making that kind of noise. And out of nowhere, that 8-pointer jumped over to him and was standing there basically over him looking at him. And all I could see at that point was my buck, his head and neck coming up out of the brush and going back down, struggling to regain his feet. So at that point, I just let out a holler of excitement. That 8-pointer turned and darted back in the direction that they originally came from. I started running out there to him, jumping over palmettos and stuff, and I got about 30 yards from him. I knocked another arrow, and he's trying to get up, dragging himself by his front legs, trying to get to his feet. And I just quickly shot again, and that one caught him, entered mid ribs, maybe the back of the ribs, and it exited his brisket right there at the base of his neck. And he just collapsed at that point. And that was it. He seconds later, he pretty much stopped moving. Ran back to the camera. I didn't go to him yet. I turned around, went back to the tree, climbed up, turned the camera on. I was pretty much crying at that point. And then I took the camera down, climbed back down, and then walked over there to my bow. And with the camera running, recording, I walked out there to him and propped it up and couldn't believe what I had my hands on. So anyway, that's the story.
Man, that is so crazy. So I have read the newspaper stories about it, which obviously, they don't go into the same detail. So I knew it was a good story, but man, that's even crazier than I expected. Have you ever posted that video anywhere?
So the first, probably for 4 or 5 years, I did, deer shows where I would go set up, display the deer.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Do seminars and all that kind of stuff. I had videos made of that, and it's old VHS, so it's not good quality at all. I think that video camera back then cost $250 or something like that. Anyway, it's other than selling those DVDs or VHS tapes, that's what they were, not DVDs, VHS. Yeah. At the shows, part of that video aired on Bass Pro Shop's King of Bucks TV show.
Yeah.
They took some of my footage and plugged it in on their show. So,
now, did you actually have footage of shooting him?
No, okay. I did not.
Okay, just the
recovery. Because I left.
Yeah, that's what
I left the camera in the tree. Ideally, he would have come out where he was feeding, the week earlier.
Yeah.
5 days earlier, and it would have been a 20-yard shot, and I could have gotten the shot hopefully on video.
Yeah.
But he didn't come by me that day, so I had to get down and kind of circle around and cut him off. And I just left the camera. There was really no way I could have videoed that, what happened.
Yeah, well, no regrets. You shot the biggest deer in the recorded history.
Well, then when I found him, I'm holding him, and I was so excited. I couldn't even keep track of what I was counting. I lost track a couple of times counting his points, and I had to start over. So, it was just, even to this day, it's surreal.
Did you have any idea, when you had seen him when you were scouting, did you know he was crazy big? Obviously you knew he's a big deer. You know the scores of the other bucks that were with. Do you have any idea what he is?
No. So when I saw him the first time the week earlier, all I could count was 17 points, and he kept putting his head down, picking his head up, turning his head. So I would lose track of what I counted. So all I could count were 17 points. So I knew he was at least 17. He ended up being 24 scoreable points.
And what was his gross score?
He grosses 212 and 0.8, and nets 206 and 0.8. So he was a real symmetrical 10-pointer with non-typical points. And as a typical 10-pointer, I believe his 10-point frame was 151 or 153. And then the rest is non-typical points to make up that final score.
I mean, I don't get caught up in net knowledge. That's just insanely huge. You know, he grew it. I'll give him credit for it.
Yeah, exactly. I hate nets. Nets are for fishes.
Yeah.
Or fish.
So, man, I had so many questions going through that, but you do such a good job telling that story. I had to bite my tongue. So fine. I guess I'm going to try to go back and hit on some of the questions I had. Okay. I guess the first thing is, what's funny is when you describe this, I live in Georgia now, but I hunted Florida quite a bit and some Central. And I kind of just had in my mind, like, what habitat you were talking about. And it's just here, like, some of the differences. And you mentioned green, really varied. So I guess how did you go about, like, scouting? So it sounds like, this is before Onyx and you have tons of Google Maps and all this.
Yeah.
Had you even stepped foot on this property to hunt? Like, I know you had some buddies that hunted hogs. Had you gone on it at all?
No. So I think I scouted 17 times, like 17 trips up there over the summer. And to be honest, I had it wasn't a flip phone, but it was just a little cheap phone. So the Google Maps, Tracks, all that, those apps that we have now were non-existent then.
Yeah.
So I was just getting on my bike, riding out there, looking from the road, scouting different areas, and just hitting as many different areas as I could. And I wasn't even leaving cameras out there back then. I was just boots on the ground, looking for, tracks, big tracks. And I saw a handful of bucks, and they were some nice bucks, but just, I guess 110-ish, something like that.
Yeah.
Is about,
really,
what I was
Florida
seeing.
Buck. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Great bucks.
Not 200.
Right. Or I had just heard that there were some really big deer out there. So I just and I enjoy the scouting aspect of it just as much, if not more, than the actual hunting.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time, and, I try to dot my I's, cross my T's, and put in as much prep work as I possibly can to prepare for the hunts. And now with the cameras and the technology and Google Earth and all that and the apps on the phone, now it's so different because when I go on a public land or even my lease in Georgia, I'm targeting specific bucks with names. I've already named them, and I know I'm after certain bucks. So that's the difference between now and then.
Yeah.
So,
what kind of stand setup are you running? So you had a lock on and sticks. What kind of stand did you have back then?
Oh my goodness, it was one of those $39 Walmart stands. Probably. It was just a cheap chain lock on. I bet the seat wasn't 6x9, something like that. Super uncomfortable.
Yeah. And were the sticks like the solid piece, like the one solid rail?
You stack them. Yeah, stack them together, lean them up, and it was a 12-foot stick.
Yeah. Wow.
So I was probably 13 feet off the ground, something like that.
Yeah. So. And I take it did you just have one stand at the time? So you kind of like, once you saw them, you're like, okay, this is, I'm hunting here.
Yeah. I had took one stand in there and hung it, and, ended up shooting him the first day of the hunt. And then I had the second hunt, and I saw that 105 8-pointer.
Yeah.
He had just shed his velvet, and his rack was like bloody, stained blood, and he came up underneath me. I heard him coming, and doesn't even include this is just a side story. But I heard him coming through the palmettos, and I kind of rode him off. It was middle of the day, like 1:00, and anyway, next thing I know, he's 15 yards walking by me, and slowly got my bow off the hook. And when I went to stand and turn, my stand squeaked, and he froze, looked up at me real quick, and whirled and took off. So I didn't get it any other opportunity at one of the other bucks.
At the time, what was your thinking having the lock on versus, was that like a conscious decision, or was it just kind of what you had?
Yeah, so that morning when I saw him for the first time, and then he finally dissolved into gallberries and palmettos, I just was looking around, and boom, there was a perfect pine tree 20 yards from where he was feeding. And I was like, well, that's a perfect, you couldn't get in it with a climber because of the lower limbs, coming off the tree. In a climber, I couldn't have gotten 8-9 feet off the ground because of the lower limbs.
Right.
So I just said, well, I put a lock on right there. And
so you were only 12 feet up, but you had good back cover and stuff, pine trees.
Yes. Yeah, I had multiple limbs, and then the green pine needles, around me. So I was tucked in fairly well in that pine tree.
Is that kind of how you basically when you saw him go back in the, kind of disappeared, you kind of just stood right where you're at and just like, what tree should I set up in?
Yeah. Because right before I actually saw the deer, I was a couple of 100 yards down in those woods from the fire break, and there were just tracks, fresh tracks and old tracks going every direction imaginable. Like they were just walking all around in there.
Yeah.
And so I was looking down. I'm like, well, they're feeding down through here because the scrub oaks had acorns on them. The new growth coming up that was about thigh high, something like that. And I call them blackjack oaks, but I really don't know what type of oaks they were.
Kind of little scrub, yeah.
Yeah, but they had clusters of acorns growing on that new growth, and those deer were just in there eating those clusters of acorns. And so I saw that. I saw a bunch of empty holes and tracks everywhere. So, it was just putting pieces of the puzzle, which was a pretty easy puzzle to figure out then by seeing them, and then going home, coming back out 5 hours later, 4 hours later, whatever it was. And then all 4 of them were in there feeding.
Right. Yeah. I guess when you left, you only had seen or
one. That morning I only saw him.
Okay.
Yes. And then when I went back in there, all 4 of them were together.
Yeah. Man.
So, and it was quite the sight. That was really the last thing I expected to see middle of the day, the end of September, as hot as it was.
Yeah.
Was, 4 big bucks standing out there feeding.
So that was the end of September, and you said the hunt was on the 25th. Was that September? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the first time I saw him was, I guess, the 20th, the Monday.
Okay. Yeah, so you were scouting. Yeah, so it was which was probably a long 5 days between.
Oh yeah. And I didn't go back out there anymore that week. I had the stand set, and but it was a long. I told a couple of my.
I was gonna say, did you tell anybody that you were on one?
I did. I told a couple of my best friends. I said, you would not believe. Well, I had a little tape recorder on me.
Oh,
and so back then, as I would find sign, I would kind of self-record, what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And I guess that took the place of what I'm putting in my phone. So
right, yeah, you couldn't drop a pin and comment,
right,
or whatever, or take a picture with your phone or whatever. Yeah.
Right. So as I was walking out right after seeing him, I was describing on my recorder what I saw. So I was trying my best. You know, he looked like he was a typical 10 with several drop tines. He had stickers off his and so I was kind of explaining on the recorder what I saw. So when I got home, I was calling a couple of my buddies. I'm like, you will not believe what I saw. I said, you just won't believe it. So we got together and we were going through hunting magazines like North American Whitetail. And I'm like, he's like this. He's got masks like this. He's got a rack like this. And they're like, no way.
Yeah.
I said,
you're right. I don't
promise.
believe you.
Yeah. So yeah, it was surreal. But when I laid my hands on him, I didn't know what I had. I just knew it was the biggest thing I'd ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and couldn't believe that it happened.
How was life after you shot that buck? Like I saw that you got involved with Buckmaster Summit. It sounds like you did spring and stuff. Like, did you still you worked your regular day job and
yes,
traveled
by
some?
by no means.
Yeah.
I mean, it changed my life for the better.
Yeah.
Obviously, but I'm not I want to say this. I put my pants on just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And through the years, even now, like at the bow shop, people will come up to me and, hey, are you, yes, you know, I shake their hand and let them know I'm nobody simple or I'm nobody special.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my Instagram, is Simple James 13 because that's how I view myself. I'm a pretty simple guy. So it has changed my life even to this day. You know, you asked me to be on this podcast, so it's still affecting my life to the good. But I'm a firefighter for the city of Lakeland. I'm fixing to enter drop, so in 5 years I'll be retiring, hopefully at the age of 57. And life's good as far as how it's changed my life. So right after, I killed the deer, there was that kind of, now the social media wasn't out there, so it took a while for the news to get out.
Yeah, a magazine or somebody probably had to publish it and put a picture somewhere.
Yes, and I guess I don't remember exactly how. I entered Woods and Water Buck of the Year contest. Yeah. Well, I ended up winning that.
Shocker.
Well, and then with that came a bunch of prizes. And then Buckmaster magazine, every year they pick one deer. I think one year there was a co-winner, but every year they pick one deer in the country to be the recipient of their Golden Laurel Award. Mm-hmm. And so in 2000, they chose my buck as the recipient of the Golden Laurel Award. So with that, I was invited up to Montgomery, Alabama, to the Buckmasters Expo, huge 3-day event. And I had a booth set up, and they put me on a pedestal, so to speak. And they had a bunch of pictures. I went up. Before that, they invited me up, did a photo shoot. They printed out a bunch of photos. I had stacks of photos to sign, and that was really odd for me because, again, I'm nobody special. So, but signing, it was a great show. The news, I guess, started getting out. Bass Pro contacted me. They wanted to buy the deer they tried to purchase every state record for their museum in Springfield. Okay. And so that happened. They purchased the deer. I received 2 replicas of the deer. The deer is part of the King of Bucks tour. It's in their Wonders of Wildlife Museum in Springfield. Yeah. It's part of there. And ironically, one of my best friends in life, Chris, he and his family are up there right now. And about 30 minutes ago, he took a picture of my deer and sent it to me. Huh. So that's cool. That was that was really cool. So
are you happy with the decision to sell it?
Yes. I mean, as big as he is, it's as big as he is, he's just a deer,
Yeah.
and I try to keep everything in perspective. It's a monster deer, but it's just a deer. There's so many more things in life that are more important than that. And it's pretty cool to have your deer in Bass Pro's Whitetail Museum.
Yeah.
And then they have replicas in the Bass Pro stores, Brandon, Orlando. I think every Florida store. My buddy in Kansas was in Oklahoma. They had one in there. He took a picture and sent it to me in Oklahoma store. So it's pretty cool, and I don't regret selling it.
I would have sold it. I mean, you got a replica, right? So
yeah,
I imagine it was a pretty good one.
Yes, the Bass Pro mounted it. They did the mount and the replica. So
yeah. Well, I'd like to ask you a few more questions about the hunt, and then
sure.
Yeah, I've been same deal. I've been like trying not to dive deep into like asking all these tactics because I know we got limited time, but I really want to get into that later.
Well, I'm good. If you want, you just ask, and I'll keep talking.
Well, going back to the fire break, was there some like something with the terrain there that funneled them down to that spot? Like obviously when you saw the tracks, you know that was a heavy area, but I'm curious, like what was forcing them through there?
Yes. So let's say on the west side of the fire break, about 40 yards from that spot, there was a big flag pond.
Okay.
And then along the edge of that flag pond were thick palmettos. So that created the funnel, if you will, to have them cross right there in the fire break.
So it almost sounds like they were like bedding on a peninsula of a or maybe
so
a peninsula of a funnel, maybe.
Well, there was if you continued across the fire break, went down through the scrub oaks, palmettos, and it's kind of rolling terrain, got down in there, and sometime prior, like a bulldozer went through this one little area. I don't know if they had I don't think there was a fire, but it looked like a bulldozer had gone through there and bulldozed, and then all this new growth sprung up.
Yeah.
Maybe a year or two prior, they had bulldozed it, something like that. And then there was that other little pond, and it wasn't maybe 40 yards across the pond, and the pond was maybe 75 yards long.
Okay.
And then there was just there might have been 60 yards wide, but there was this little island that protruded out into that pond, and there were several large scrub oak trees, and over your head, gallberries, and probably belly button high palmettos.
Yeah.
And just really thick. And that's where they were bedded. They would just walk up in there and.
Did you walk out there after you shot the buck, or even like years later, just to check it out?
I didn't know. I did walk on the backside and try to walk up in there, but it's so thick up in there. I mean, you're just walking through, really, really thick stuff. So I really didn't get out there on that peninsula in that thick stuff.
And if a lot of that was caused by the boulder, it seems like you just kind of caught the timing right a couple of years with all that regrowth.
Yeah. Well, they hadn't, that peninsula, they hadn't bulldozed just that across the pond, that little area there.
Okay.
It looked like they had bulldozed it. And back to the day of the hunt, about 2:00, one time's kind of fuzzy now.
Yeah.
Middle of the day, it sounded like horses moving around out there in that peninsula.
Huh.
And that was those bucks. Middle of the day, they got up and they didn't come out, but they were moving around in there.
Yeah.
And you could just hear them walking through the dried palmettos, and I thought it was going to happen then.
Right.
But it didn't. And then after the hard rain and lightning passed, when I caught movement, my buck was standing out there on the edge of that stuff, shaking like a wet dog after a bath.
Yeah.
So
in the middle of the day, they just probably like shifted positions
just stretched and got up and moved
you
around.
Had seen them in the middle of the day scouting right where you were hunting, so I could see why you might think like, oh, they're going to come out here and get some of these acorns.
Yes, but it didn't happen until probably maybe I don't know, in the video, you can see the orange sky. When I got to him, the sun was just setting.
Yeah.
When I got to him. So, I probably shot him 30 minutes before sunset, something like that, 20 minutes before actual sunset.
In hindsight, had you not seen him that day, were you going to like sit that spot the whole weekend?
Probably I would have set up in there just by the nature of the size and the number of large tracks.
Yeah.
I can easily say that now, but I probably would have set up there at least part of the time.
Yeah.
Because the tracks were so big and there were so many of them.
When you set up, were you worried about the wind? Like, did you know what the prevailing wind was going to be, or was that just like fortunate it worked out to be in the right spot? Or
I would say I was just fortunate for it to work out because I pre-picked the tree. I went out there and set the stand up, and to be honest, I probably wasn't thinking of what the winds were going to be.
Yeah.
And it just worked out.
Is there like a lot of stuff you think, like looking back at it, like things you did right but maybe didn't realize it?
Yes, and then there was some things I did wrong that it still just worked out. I do a lot of things different. I'm super scent conscious now.
Okay.
And one small tactic, if you will, that I do, and I see it so often, even close buddies, and I'm not a know-it-all. I try not to come across. I just give hints here and there. But I never wear my rubber boots, which are my primary hunting boots.
Yep.
I never wear my rubber boots driving my truck. I always keep my boots in the back of the truck. I have a topper on my truck.
Mm-hmm.
When I take them off, I spray them down. Before I put them on, I spray them down with scent away spray. How I came to that conclusion is I went out to Nebraska and hunted years ago. We left the hotel room. It was snowing, extremely cold. We left the hotel room. I had on my 1600 Thinsulate rubber boots. We went to the gas station to get gas and to get donuts and coffee or whatever we got. Mm-hmm. I got out. My buddy pulled up at the gas pumps. I got out of the truck, walked up, went in the convenience store, got my stuff, came out, got in the truck, went out to the property, walked out to my stand. Well, when daylight came, I could see my perfect boot tracks in the snow coming down the ravine and going right to the base of my tree. Well, I had a pretty good buck come along. Wasn't a shooter, but he was probably a 3-year-old, come walking down the hill. And when he crossed my path, my boot, he about jumped out of his hooves. And I had those gas fumes from the pumps on my boots. And he smelt that and just about turned inside out and turned around and went the way he came and just blowing and running.
Yeah.
So, and so during the course of the work week or what have you, you're wearing whatever shoes, boots that you have. You're getting gas at the pump. You're picking up trace gas fumes. You get into your truck. Now you're putting those scent molecules on your gas pedal, your brake pedal, and your floor mats. So when you wear your scent-free rubber boots in the truck while you're driving, or leather hunting boots, whatever boots you're wearing, and you hunt in, you're picking up those same gas scents off your gas pedal, brake pedal, floorboard onto your boots. Well, now they may be rubber boots, but now they're not scent-free. Your foot odor's not getting out, but what is on your sole?
Yeah.
So that's why I never wear my rubber boots while driving.
That makes sense.
Even scouting, when I go in and check my cameras, I follow the same plan, same scenario every time. I get out, spray my boots down really good, all in the soles, put them on. Scrapes are a really big factor for me as far as scouting and getting my inventory. Before I walk up to the scrape to doctor it up, Black Widow, Deer lures is the scent that I use.
Mm-hmm.
Highly recommend that. That might be another interview. But before I walk up to the scrape, I spray my boots down. I try to put on rubber gloves before I walk up there. I try my best not to touch any overhanging limb, leaf, branch on that tree where the licking branch is. And I'm just very scent conscious. And I try to not alert the deer little as I can. So
you mentioning that Nebraska buck reminds me. I remember this buck. They aged him at 3 years old. Is that like
yes, 3.5?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Was he? I mean, the best you can remember. Do you think he had the biggest body of
no,
the deer you were looking at?
I would say the 10-pointer might have had a bigger body, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
My buck weighed 150 pounds on the hoof.
Which is, I mean, for a Florida buck, that's a heavy buck.
Yes, and so in all the years since then, they age the deer. They try to age the deer at the check station, the biologists.
Yeah.
There at Green Swamp West. Yeah. So 3-year-olds, 3.5-year-olds, they typically weigh right around that 150, high 40s to pushing 160. Yeah. So his weight was right in there along with the 3-year-old. He just had, 6-inch bases.
Yeah, he's just a genetic freak.
Just a genetic freak.
How many times have you hunted Green Swamp West since?
Oh, a bunch.
Yeah. I imagine you're putting in for every year, and yeah.
Yeah, I don't put in as much as you would think, but I do try to get it. And I've killed a handful of respectable bucks out of there. There's been some giants killed in there, 150s killed in there since. Yeah. 130s. I've pursued countless bucks, 115 to 135 in there over the years, and those bigger ones just seem to get shot by other people or elude me. And but to anymore, it's not about the filling a tag. I enjoy going. As you get older, your priorities shift and change, and what's important in life, and I'm just enjoying the ride and enjoy having the opportunity to get out there and still pursue what I love doing.
All right, y'all, I'm going to have to cut it off right there, and you'll need to wait the next couple of weeks for the next episode to come out. I continued this conversation with James and was able to ask him all the questions I wanted to interrupt him during his story and ask about. And we talk about his modern day strategies, including how he uses trail cameras, he uses mock scrapes, his scent control techniques, how he goes about scouting a property while he's hunting on public land in Florida and his lease in Georgia. So definitely worth checking back in for that one. I hope you really enjoyed this episode so far. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, thank you so much to those of you who stuck around, stayed subscribed, and kept an eye out for new content to be coming out. And to the new listeners, I hope you really enjoyed this and that you'll stick around as well. And I would really appreciate it if you just take a few moments and leave a review. So hopefully I can get this climbing back up the rankings after being quiet for so long. One other thing I wanted to remind you about, Amazon Prime Day is coming up. And while I don't own hunting gear deals anymore, I do still recommend you guys checking it out, huntinggeardeals.com. And I'm sure Cameron is going to be having a post up with all of the best deals for Prime Day. So Prime Day is June 21st and 22nd. I'll probably be having a deal on my Pith Purge on there as well. So if you are interested in buying one, you might wait for Prime Day. Like I said, if you have any questions or anything about that, just reach out and let me know. So thanks a lot for hanging in there with me, and we're out down south.